We are in the middle of chapter 10 here, in Hamishpatim Tashrim Aleph, the second paragraph, so on the bottom of page Chav Hey. I believe that's where we're at, the second paragraph here. So we said that person learns Torah, so on the one hand, there has to be, he has to learn Torah so thoroughly that he realizes that it becomes his own, and obviously there's pleasure in that. But we said that you also have to have avdos, there has to be servitude. Right, so we talked about in chapter 9, we talked about the different levels of servitude, the Eved Knaini, the Eved Ivri, and the Amma Ivriya, and how that relates to the Tzaddik, the Rosh, and the Beinani. And we said that that what's expected of somebody is the Avodah of Eved Ivri, which means somebody who has pleasure in servitude. And also to aspire to that level of Tzaddik, to Amma Ivriya, which is an Avodah of Ishapcha, of transformation. And yet, the Rebbe mentions here now that in passing, even though our parsha is talking about the Eved Ivri and Amma Ivriya, about the Jewish bondsman and the Jewish maidservant, nevertheless, the Eved Knaini is mentioned in passing. So even though we had asked why, if we're talking about servitude, so why don't we start with Eved Knaini? That's the ultimate form of servitude. We said no, because the Eved Knaini, the Eved Knaini has no pleasure, and the point is that there has to be servitude, but it has to be with pleasure. So that's why we start with Eved Ivri. Yet, Eved Knaini is mentioned, at least in passing, parenthetically, Eved Knaini is mentioned where it says in the parsha of Amma Ivriya, Lo Yisei Tzikitzesu Avadim. So we do mention it. Why? So the Rebbe says because there's a certain advantage to the service of Eved Knaini. We say that it's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to have pleasure in servitude. That's not the Eved Knaini. Then the Rebbe says we have to go back still to the Eved Knaini because there is an advantage to iskafia. Iskafia means that a person breaks his desires. A person has a desire to do something that is ungodly, unholy, and by not giving in to that temptation, not giving in to that desire, so that's a form of service of Hashem that's very special. As we're gonna learn in a moment. That idea of engaging with the unholy is something that's lacking by the tzaddik, because the tzaddik doesn't have contact with the unholy. Tzaddik is only serving Hashem. He doesn't have temptation for something that's not godly, and so he doesn't come in contact with that. So the idea of iskafia, of breaking a desire for something ungodly, is seemingly doesn't exist by the tzaddik. Now, Rebbe is telling us here that the tzaddik also has to have that avodah of iskafia. That also has to be by the tzaddik. How do we have that? So we find, because the famous quote by Chazal from Medrash that we quoted earlier in the Maimer, that seemingly doesn't really add up if you think deeply about it, where it says that a person should say, I want to commit the sin, but what should I do? God doesn't allow me to. So we quoted from the Rambam in the Shemona Prakim, where the Rambam makes a distinction between different mitzvahs, but in the end, it's still problematic. Why would somebody invite upon themselves this thing? Why would you verbalize and say that you want to do something that you shouldn't be wanting to do? So we're talking about a tzaddik here. Why does a tzaddik have to say that? Because since there is an advantage to breaking the unholy, breaking that unholy spirit, that unholy desire, that's where you come in contact with the unholy. So the tzaddik who can engage in it has to therefore, in a sense, create a desire that's really not something that he has. He has to create that in order to be able to break it, right? So the difference between the tzaddik and the rasha, or the difference between the tzaddik and what we talk about in Eved Knaini, is that a person has a desire that's ungodly, and he has to break that desire. So what happens when he breaks that desire? Really, his desire, like we said about Eved Knaini, is avda b'efker nichale. Somebody has a desire, he wants to do something inappropriate. He breaks it and he does what God wants. Where's his pleasure, though? His pleasure is in the thing that he's not doing. He's overriding his own pursuit of pleasure to do something else. But by the tzaddik wants to do what God wants. And he sees that the Torah tells him you have to say efshi. He has to say, the Torah tells him you have to say you desire on something ungodly. And Torah is a Torah semes, Torah of truth. So we read in the footnotes. So if the Torah is telling us that the person has to say that a tzaddik should say he wants to commit the sin, then it has to be genuine. He has to mean it. It has to be the truth. So by verbalizing it, he creates a desire for something that he shouldn't desire, right? But what's the reason he's creating that desire? Is only so he cannot give into it. So here, he has the advantage of iskafia without the disadvantage. The advantage of iskafia is that you break an ungodly desire. The disadvantage is that when you're breaking it, your pleasure is in the desire, not in the breaking of the desire. But by the tzaddik, the whole reason he's creating this desire is in order to break it. So where's his pleasure? His pleasure is in not giving in to that newly developed desire. Right? Okay. So by the tzaddik, you have the embodiment of these two ideas, where on the one hand, he can break the desire, and on the other hand, that's where his pleasure is, in the breaking of the desire. Let's continue here, second paragraph here, in chapter 10, the bottom of page Chaf Hey. So v'hine yedua, she'amshocha shal yidei avodah diskafia, amshocha nailis yoser, ma'amshocha shal yidei avodah dishapcha. So now, the Rebbe says that why is it necessary for the tzaddik to engage in iskafia as well? Generally, we think that iskafia is a lower level. Somebody who has ungodly desires needs to break it, subdue them, get them under control, and do something else. The ultimate form is transformation, where you could take your own natural instinct for pleasure and channel that only in the divine, only in godliness. That's where your pleasure is. That's a transformation of a instinct, a natural instinct that could go both ways, and reforming it, transforming it into a godly kind of an instinct. So that seems to be a higher level. And yet, there's also an advantage to this iskafia. What is that? So he says, "Kemaimer kadiskafia sitrachri istalik yikar dukuchbricha b'chol alman." We know, we quote the famous quote from the Zohar, famous in Basi Lagani, that and the Rebbe quotes in Tanya, that when you break the spirit of the other side, of the unholy, so through that is istalik yikara d'kuchabricha b'chol almin, the godly, the glory of God is nistalik in the whole world. When we say nistalik, what does that mean? Generally we say nistalik, it means it goes away. It's removed from there, right? That's histalka. Somebody passes away, say they're nistalik, they're removed from this world. So generally it means removed, but here it can't mean that it's removed. You break the evil spirit, so godliness is removed from the world. So what does it mean? So Chassidus explains, when we say istalik, we're talking about the type of light that is revealed in the world when you break that evil spirit, that ungodly spirit. And that, what is that? It's what in other words, the yikar d'kuchabricha, the glory of godliness, the light of godliness that becomes revealed in the world is what type? The istalik kind. The kind that on its own is removed from the world. It's too high for the world. So the light that's really beyond being revealed in this world, that's what's revealed when we break that spirit. Yeah? That shal yidei avodah diskafia, hu amshachas ha'or shebebchinas reimamus istalik. That through breaking that evil spirit, you reveal in the world the light that is naturally removed from the world. Right? So that's a very high level. And that comes only through breaking the sitra achra. So he says, "V'yashleimar d'amshacha shaydei iskafia the tzadikim iskafia shel gufa hi atainuk shalem hi amshacha nailis oid yeser." So now that we've explained earlier that the tzaddik, his form of iskafia is really fundamentally different in a sense than the iskafia of your non-tzaddik. And where in the non-tzaddik, the iskafia is actually breaking a desire for something else. By the tzaddik, the whole desire and pleasure is in breaking it. That's where the pleasure is. That's why he has to create, in a sense, a foreign desire so he could break it. So there's pleasure in it. So here, that's a higher level of iskafia itself. Why? So he says like this: why is it that iskafia brings about such a high level of godly revelation in the world? Even higher in a sense than through transformation, than through isapcha. Why is that? So he says like this: it's because when a person does something against his own nature and will, so then the resulting revelation that comes from above is also beyond something that goes against its nature. In other words, we know that heaven and earth are in sync, in that the way we do things down here, that causes, right, midah keneged midah, right? The Gemara talks about this idea that the midah keneged midah, that the way we behave down here, that's how God behaves with us. So when we behave in a certain way, that brings about a similar mirror sort of behavior from above. So when a person goes against their nature down here, does what God wants, and that's going out of their own natural way of behaving and character, what does that bring about from above? That from above they should also behave in a way that's out of its nature. So what does that mean? What's nature above? So when we're talking about a high level of godliness, so what's the nature of a level that's so high is that it can't come down because it's so high. That's its nature. But when a person down here breaks his nature, iskafia, he breaks that natural desire. So what happens above? we break the nature of that light that can then therefore come back down here to the earth. So that's why through iskafia you can reveal such a great light. Because since iskafia is a breaking of your own nature, your own limitation, so the same is true above. That what comes down is the result of what comes down is not a light that is able naturally to come down into this world, but one that's far beyond it, that naturally has no business being here. Right? It's the same kind of thing. Okay, so now he says like this: that that the light that naturally is beyond, and from its nature it should not be revealed, should be then revealed, which is against its nature. So when a person, your regular everyday Joe, performs a skafia, breaks his nature, so what happens? So if we're talking about everything being in sync, so when a person breaks his nature, what is that? What's the result? The result is a light that breaks its nature. A light that naturally shouldn't be revealed, that's then revealed. But when a person breaks his nature, on one hand he's breaking his nature, on the other hand he's also not enjoying it. He has to break himself. He's forcing himself to do it. So the same is true that even though the light that comes down breaks its nature and comes down, but how does it come? It comes in a way that it forces itself. It's compelled to come. In other words, we'll finish in a second. You have like this. You have, within a person's will, in desire, you have the chitzoni yisaratzin and pnimi yisaratzin. You have your inner desire, your inner will, and you have the outer will. What's the difference? The inner will is something that a person, or inner desire is something where a person has pleasure. And so therefore he engages in that or pursues it with pleasure. Whereas the outer, external part of the will, since it's external, it's something that doesn't involve the deeper level of pleasure. So when a person breaks himself, so since he's forcing himself to do it, so what comes down? Something that goes against its own nature, a very high level of godliness, but it comes down in a way that it forces itself down, it compels itself, just like the person compels himself. So that's an external level. A deeper level is when it comes with pleasure. So how does that happen? How do you bring down a divine light that's so high that on one hand breaks its nature, on the other hand that it's done with pleasure, meaning from the deeper part of the divine will? So that comes when a person engages in that behavior also with pleasure. But when a person's iskafia is done in a manner that's his pleasure, so then what comes down is this level of godliness that comes from the depth of the will and pleasure from above. Okay. Now, chapter 11. So now all of this is now going to all tie together. We had a bunch of elements that we were floating around here in the Maimer. Specifically, as we dissected the pasuk of Hamishpatim asher tasim lefneim kisikna eved, the 1.5 opening pasukim of Parshas Mishpatim, we talked about the Hamishpatim, what's Mishpatim, and what's Tasim, and what's Kisikna, and Eved, and how all of these things are reconciled. And Tasim is Sima, we quoted the Yerushalmi. Kisikna seems to be inconsistent with the language. We're talking to Moshe, he's talking about the people. So why does it say in a singular and in first person rather than in the plural and third person? So now it's all going to tie together. The Rebbe says like this: we're in chapter 11. So So we quoted this earlier, right? That the pasuk says ve'ela mishpatim. So the parsha opens with ve'ela mishpatim. It opens with avav, which is a continuation. So it opens mid-sentence. You shouldn't open a sentence, certainly a new chapter, with an and, because if you're continuing from before, it's not anything new, right? So, but the parsha opens with ve'ela. So why? So Chazal say, because Eila Moisef al Rishonim. So what does that mean? That Ma Rishonim Misina Av Eila Misina. That this parsha begins with a vav, a prefix of a vav, to connect it to the previous parsha, to tell us that just as the earlier commandments, the ones that are beyond rationale, come from Sinai, just as we have these divinely these commandments that seem divine because they're not rational, they're beyond our comprehension, so they're very godly seeming. Just as they come from Har Sinai, we had no other way of getting them. So the same is true that even the rational laws, even Mishpatim, everything that's going to follow, also comes from Har Sinai. So what would this mean? The simple meaning of this Ve'ela Moisef al Rishonim means what? When I look at Chukim and I look at Mishpatim, I look at non-rational mitzvahs, I look at rational mitzvahs, which one do I see closer related to Har Sinai? The non-rational ones, the religious ones, the spiritual ones, right? And then the Eila Hamishpatim is telling me, Ve'ela Moisev al Rishonim. Just as those come from our Sinai, these also do. So these also come from Sinai means it's not to the same extent, right? Those earlier, obviously, they all come from our Sinai, they all come from our Sinai, they all come from God. But where is that felt more in the Chukim, not in the Mishpatim, right? Now the Rebbe is going to turn it on its head. He says like this. When we say ve'ela moisef al rishonim, what does this mean? The iridas v'amshachas ha'torah b'mishpatim shehem uvan gam b'seichel adam, or b'frat al yedei zeh nitan ha'koyach la'adam sheyuchal lilmay torah ba'ifin dasher tasim lifnei ma'ba'avan v'azbar v'at sh'atorah nikras al shmoi hi ha'yisafa al ha'rishonim. Ve'ela moisef al rishonim means not that just as the earlier ones come from our Sinai, so do these, but it's moisef al rishonim. There's something additional. In other words, there's more Sinai in the Mishpatim than you'll find even in the other ones. It flips it on its head. But also within that sentence itself, within this quote from Chazal, the Rebbe reveals a deeper meaning, which almost implies the opposite, right? That when it comes to Mishpatim, which is when a person has the capacity, as we've discussed at length, to understand Torah with his own seichel, with his own intellect, something which is beyond. So it goes to Tasim Lifneim. He understands it thoroughly, right? To the extent that the Torah becomes his, it's called by his name, it becomes Torah, so it's his Torah. So this is now an addition to what we had before. In other words, the Sinai is felt more here than it's felt in the ones that the person can't understand. Why? Because as we said in chapter 3, when a person can understand Torah, so what does that reveal? It reveals that Torah, it reveals the infinite light of God that's beyond definition, which allows Torah, which is beyond human intellect, to be understood in human intellect, to bring two opposites together. Right? So where is that felt? That's felt in the rational mitzvahs. So in Chukim, that you would think that's the normal thing. You have mitzvahs that you don't understand. That makes sense. That there should be mitzvahs that I don't understand. Why? Because God is beyond intellect, beyond my comprehension, and so therefore there are things that are beyond my comprehension. Problem is that's limiting him to being beyond human capacity, beyond human intellect. But when we have mitzvahs that we understand, so here what's revealed, that on the one hand it's divine, which would be beyond intellect. On the other hand, it's understood in human intellect. Why? Because God's not limited to any of these definitions of infinite and finite, right? So what's revealed in the Mishpatim is a higher level of godliness than what would be in the Chukim, and that's the meaning of Ve'ela Moisef al Rishonim. This enhances or brings out another level, a deeper level in Sinai than would be in Chukim. Allah Yisif, that adds further. Not only is it that we reveal a higher level, the Eretz of Abligvul, but when a person learns Torah in a way that the Torah that he understands the Torah, that also enhances the Torah itself. Right? We had discussed this in chapter 3 a little bit, right? What does it mean that the Torah goes from Torah Savai to Torah Sai, to a person's Torah? Isn't that, we understand how the person is enhanced, but how's the Torah enhanced as a result, right? So Rebbe is going to explain it, take it another step here. He says like this, because when the Torah comes down into rationale, to human rationale and intellect, what's revealed down here in this world? God's wisdom. Chachma d'Atzilus. Right? Like we said, Kisikna is Atzilus. Ela shachibur the chachmas shakadosh baruch hu shelamayla miseichel anivraim miseichel adam ha'idei hamshacham eretz avligvul shelamayla mechachma. It's just that what's revealed. How is it possible that that chachma of Atzilus should come into human intellect? It's because of the eretz of Abligvul that's higher than that's not limited to any of that. Hainu shagilu the eretz of Abligvul hu rak nesin eskayich lebchinas hachachma d'Atzilus shemischaber shetischaber im seichel adam v'leishim izgala eretz of Abligvul atzmai. In other words, like this. You have it like this. We kind of lumped it all together in a sense in chapter 3, and here the Rebbe is going to separate between. We're going to bring out some nuance here. There's Chachmas HaTorah, there's divine intellect, divine wisdom, which naturally is beyond, it's infinite, and so therefore it's beyond the finite mind, the finite brain and capacity. Then there is Torah as it comes into human intellect, as it becomes a rational law, something that could be comprehended by the human mind. So what's comprehended by the human mind? This infinite wisdom can be finite. How is that possible? It's possible because there's something beyond, because God is beyond the definition of the limitations of infinite and finite, and so therefore the infinite and finite can coexist, they can come together. An infinite idea can be grasped by a finite mind. Okay.
You said that that's the Mila of Torah Sai, right?
Right. But so we lumped it together in that there's so 1 second. So that's, the way we said it is when a person understands Torah thoroughly, so that brings about that idea of the Gilei of Ein Sof HaBli, right? That the godly, the light that's not limited and can't be confined even to infinity, right? Here the Rebbe is separating, saying there's the way the way it is in Torah itself, right? The fact that there are mitzvahs that are rational, whether you study them and understand them thoroughly or not, is beside the point. The fact that it could be understood already brings out that idea of the Ein Sof HaBli. But now a person is understanding himself. Now a person is studying Torah and going to thoroughly understand it. Now something else happens. What happens? So you have like this. You have Chachma of the Eibishter. The Eibishter is Chachma. The Eibishter is wisdom. We know it says, right? Hu Amado Hu Yideya. He's one with his wisdom. Hu v'Chachma Se'echad. God is one with his wisdom. But really, he's still God and there's his wisdom. Wisdom's already, even though he's one with his wisdom, but he's also higher than his wisdom, right? So Torah is Chachma of the Eibishter. It's God's Chachma. So when Chachma, which is infinite, because it's the Eibishter's, it's God's Chachma, so it's infinite, when it comes down into human intellect, so what's revealed? That God, as he's beyond any of that, has the capacity to bring the infinite wisdom into finite understanding. But what do you have here? When a person starts to study Torah, what do you have? You have God's wisdom. Now, when you think about it, you think, well, what business do I have understanding infinite wisdom? Oh, because God is not limited to that. But what do I have here? I have the wisdom, not the Ein Sof HaBli itself, right? Or put it in other terms, you have a teacher that teaches a student, yeah. So the student obviously doesn't have the same capacity as the teacher. The teacher is far smarter, right? Far more knowledgeable than the student. The teacher now takes an idea and brings it down to the level of the student, right? So the more brilliant the teacher, the more he'll have an ability to bring a higher idea into a lower mind, right? The more abstract an idea, the more complicated and difficult an idea is to grasp, right? The more a person could explain it to somebody who's not intellectually on that level, that shows a great power in the teacher. So when you go to a lecture, and the lecturer is so brilliant that he could take such an abstract idea that you had no idea of before and distill it in such a way that you can understand it, what does that tell you? It shows that the teacher is a great teacher, right? The teacher has abilities, capacities that are far beyond what you can imagine. But when you walk out of the class, what do you walk out with? The idea, not the teacher's brilliance. You're coming away with the idea. The fact that you can walk away with the idea shows that the teacher is brilliant. But the teacher's brilliance isn't the teacher. You don't have any of that brilliance. That's still the teacher's brilliance. You just have this idea. So that's what we're saying. When in Torah, the fact that Torah could be understood in human intellect shows that God is not limited. But how does that affect Torah itself? Is that capacity transmitted into Torah itself? That's what the Rebbe says here like this. When a person studies Torah in a way that the Torah becomes his Torah, the person, so that brings about the Ein Sof HaBli into Torah itself. So it's not just that there's a potential for a person to be able to understand, and that's because of the Ein Sof HaBli. But when it actually becomes the person's, when a person understands Torah to the extent that we call it Torah Soy, so now that enhances the Torah itself, because it brings about that Ein Sof HaBli into Torah. Let's keep going here. Because Mavur about Rushim Dezesha Torah Nikras Torah Saida Adam who Lefisha Al Yidei Esek Torah Lishma L'Shem Torah who Mamshich Ba'Gil Ein Sof HaBli Gvul V'Lach Nikras Torah Al Shma Lefisha Himshich Ba'Gil Izeh. So this is another meaning in what it says. The idea of Torah Lishma. A person learns Torah Lishma. So what does it mean to learn Torah Lishma? It's a lengthy topic. That is a bunch of different ways of understanding it. But in Chassidus, one of the things that's explained in Chassidus, learning Torah Lishma means you learn Torah for the sake of Torah. We learned in the Maimer, Basi Lagani, the last Maimer we learned about David was Mechaber Torah de L'Mayla, right? That David HaMelech was enhancing Torah. He was connecting Torah with what's higher than Torah, right? So it's the same idea. Torah Lishma means that a person learns Torah for the sake of Torah, for the benefit of the Torah. That the Torah benefits from the person's learning the Torah, right? So. Not because of the mitzvah, because through a person learning Torah and understanding it so thoroughly, that enhances the Torah itself, that you reveal in the Torah the Ein Sof HaBli. that it should be revealed. So via Shleimar, the ve'ela hu vav ela. Vav ha'maisif hu ha'isaf shenasis b'Torah. Elu lashing. So let's do this outside. So the Rebbe says like this idea that you have, now we've gone to another two steps. There's the way the Torah is explained in human intellect, which is the result of God, that's higher than the Chachma of Torah, right? That allows the Torah to be understood. And then there is, when the Torah becomes the person's Torah, what happens is that now is manifest in Torah itself. The person now accesses that level itself. So now we can understand what ve'ela Hamishpatim means. So it's explained that ve'ela is vav ela. What's vav ela mean? Ve'ela, vav ela. So vav, the letter vav, as a prefix, we know means and, right? Vav also, vav is an idea of drawing something from above. So number one, the vav is, you take a yud and you extend it downwards. That's taking something from higher and bringing it lower. And that's why also vav is an and. It means and, because and is connecting what's from before, or would be higher, to the next step, to what's lower, to what comes afterwards, right? What's beneath it. So vav represents this idea of the divine, the Ein Sof HaBli that is accessed through Torah, through understanding Torah. Eila is revelation. So when we study Torah, but it doesn't become Torah delayed, the Torah doesn't become his Torah. So yes, the fact that you can understand Torah at all is a sign that there's Ein Sof HaBli at work here. That's enabling this. But that Ein Sof HaBli is concealed. So that's a vav. That's the vav. That's the and. There's Ein Sof HaBli, but it's concealed. But when you say vav eila, what happens? The vav, that Ein Sof HaBli that you're accessing through learning, when you understand it thoroughly, then it becomes eila. That becomes revealed. Right? Eila, when you say these, you can point to something. You say this, that's revelation. Right? Zez is gilui. Eila is gilui. What? Right. Hineza. Exactly. We talked about hine as well. And eila is the same thing. If you say, get me some of that. What's that? Nobody knows. But when I say, get me some of this, you know what I'm talking about, right? So that's revelation. So he says like this. So Shleimar dezeh sheva eila hu vav eila. Vav ha'maisif hu ha'isaf shenasis b'Torah. The vav is the enhancement that happens in Torah, but that enhancement can remain concealed. Eila hu lashon gilui. Eila is revelation. Upirish ve'eila. Vav eila hu sha'isaf b'Torah shenimshach ba'erin tzeva bligvul hi begilui. That becomes revealed. Hainu. When we say ve'ela, vav eila, what we're saying is that it's not just that that Ein Sof HaBli enables a person to understand Torah, but that Ein Sof HaBli itself becomes revealed in the Torah when a person studies Torah and makes it his own. He understands that thoroughly. Okay, chapter 12. We're gonna finish off. Okay, so mamshich b'kasav asher tasam lifneim. So the pasuk continues. We said ve'ela hamishpatim. Right? So vav eila hamishpatim. Right? Mishpatim is the mitzvahs that we understand them. That we would have the vav. But then we're saying that it has to be in a manner of eila. That has to be revealed. So in other words, not just mishpatim that the Torah is rationally understood, but you have to actually make it your own. Right? And then the pasuk continues, asher tasim l'fneim. That, how do you get the vav to be eila? How do you reveal that? Is through asher tasim l'fneim. Tasim l'fneim, like we said, tamam yashav talmudim, we quoted from the Gemara, right? You have to understand thoroughly. V'yashleimar sha'asher hu gam lashon oisher v'tainug. So now we're adding another point. Tasim l'fneim is that it should be understood thoroughly, but asher also comes from the word oisher. Asher kishur niban is right. Asher is oisher, is pleasure. Hainu she'inyin deve'ela vav eila isaf shemshachas b'Torah b'bchinas gilim ma'atzmas ayin sof he b'bchinas hatainu. What's revealed? That level of pleasure. Remember, we quoted before about eskafia, that by the tzaddik the eskafia comes from pnimius haratzim. It's because there's pleasure, right? So same as here. Since it's asher tasim lifneim, since it's done, you're studying Torah in a way that it becomes yours, and there's pleasure in the Torah. So what happens as a result? You're revealing the Ein Sof from the level of pleasure, from the highest level, pnimius of Ein Sof. The fact that a person studies Torah is a yoke, as we explained earlier. Bittul the eved can also vav zayin, as we explained earlier. That we're talking about this. A person studies Torah in a manner of eved, servitude, who dugmas in iskafia. That is, we said, if you're studying Torah as a yoke, so that's like iskafia, which iskafia has no pleasure. The person would rather has pleasure elsewhere, right? So on one hand, because remember we asked. Kisikna, we explained that kisikna means that you study it so thoroughly that you acquire, it becomes yours. But then the Rebbe says, how do you reconcile that with the simple meaning of the text, which is that kisikna means eved, that you're acquiring an eved, servitude. So is it that it becomes yours, which means there's a lot of pleasure there, or is it eved? So we talked about these two tracks. Now we're bringing them together. That on one hand, kisikna, that's Eved, that's oil Torah. V'zeh sha'abitul shaloi hu ba'ofen sha'abitul enu sholas mitzvus ela adrab. Shemitzad habitul gufa hu margish ha'Torah hi Torah soi while derech ha'искafia the tzadikim she'iskafia she'atzma hi ha'tainik shalem. So the fact that a person can have these two things. On the one hand, he has kisikna Eved, that he studies Torah as oil. He accepts upon himself the yoke of Torah, meaning he studies Torah with complete submission, bittul. He recognizes it's not his own ability, his own talents that enables it. He studies Torah with humility. And on the other hand, it's kisikna, it becomes his, meaning that's his passion. So that's similar to what we said earlier about the iskafia of tzaddikim. That the tzaddik on the one hand has iskafia, and on the other hand there's pleasure in the iskafia. So on the one hand you study Torah with oil Torah, there's bittul, and on the other hand there's pleasure. Well, that, right? So therefore, what happens, the result, just as we quoted earlier about iskafia, see how everything builds and flows into each other, this idea, this progression leads to this point. The conclusion. Just as we said earlier about iskafia, that the tzaddik also needs iskafia, but the tzaddik has pleasure in iskafia. And as we explained, the whole idea of iskafia, what's the point of iskafia? Because you're going against your nature, that brings something else down. It brings about a similar reaction from above. So the same is here. When a person studies Torah on the one hand, like an Eved, but on the other hand, it's kisikna. he has two things. One, he's total humility, and yet that's where his pleasure is, by the tzaddik. So what happens as a result? What he reveals is, it becomes vav eila. He reveals the erin sef habligvul is manifest in Torah. In what manner? In a manner of pleasure. And through a person studying Torah in a manner of tasim l'fneim, asher tasim l'fneim, that asher is pleasure. Tasim l'fneim, he understands it, and that's where his pleasure is. And then kisikna eved, there's the idea of Kabbalah's oil of oil Torah, and the fact that it becomes Torah delay, it becomes his. Shalimud b'avanav asbar b'yachad im zeh bebitul the eved. Shebchdei shalimud at nigla yeh b'ofen zeh, while yidei limud at pinimis Torah tasim loshin sima oitzer. Yeah, and how does it happen? How can a person do all of this? How can you study Torah? The Torah is, on one hand, you do it humbly, with humility. On the other hand, it becomes yours, you understand it thoroughly. And even when you understand thoroughly, you never lose sight of the fact that you're an Eved. You're a servant of Hashem. It doesn't lead to a greater sense of ego, but to even more humility. And yet, still you find pleasure in it. How do you get all that together? It's through Asher Tasim. We quoted from the Yerushalmi, Tasim Lashon Sima. And the Mefarshim explain what's Sima, a hidden treasure, is Pnimius HaTorah. So it's through, a person learns Nigla, you're learning a Blat Gemara, but you also learned in the morning, you learned the Chassidus, so that informs the way you learn Nigla as well, right? So that enables you to have all these things come together, and through this we merit Torah Mashiach, which is Torah Chadasha Mititeitzei, meaning Chidush in Torah, just as when a person's Torah delay becomes his, he's Mechadish in Torah, he enhances the Torah, brings something new into Torah, so the same is going to happen when Mashiach comes. The same reactionary thing, there'll be Torah Chadasha, Meiti Teitz, the sin of Chidush, Begula, Amitis Vashlema, Adem Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'meher B'yameinu Mamish. Do we have another second? Yeah. Or no? No, so just to tie it all together. Hamishpatim lifneim kisikna eved. Right? We're saying that this is a general message. That's also one of the questions we asked is, why is it suddenly here there's an introduction? How you're supposed to go about teaching it. Everywhere in the Torah it says, talk to them, tell them. It doesn't give a general pedagogical instruction how you're supposed to teach the people. Only here, there's a whole introduction. You have to teach it to them that they understand it thoroughly. What's the point? So the point is, since we're talking about right after Har Sinai, so the Eibusher is giving Moshe Rabbeinu a general instruction how a Yid is supposed to study Torah. Right? And he says like this. Ve'ela, there's a Vav. There's Erin Sef HaBligvul that's far beyond anything. For that we want to be Eila, we want it to come and be revealed in Torah. How does that happen? It happens in Mishpatim. When we understand Torah, Torah is rational and we can understand it. How is it that we understand it? Because of that Vav. And how is that Eila, how does that Vav become Eila? How is that revealed in Torah? Not just how are we aware of the fact that something higher is at play that enables us to understand Torah, but that it should actually be revealed in Torah. It's through Asher, studying Torah with pleasure. Tasim Lifneim, place it before him through thoroughly understanding it, which leads to obviously great pleasure, right? But that has to be in a manner of kisikna. You have to understand it so thoroughly that it becomes yours, you acquire, you own it, but at the same time it has to be Eved. Right? So we see how all of this comes together. When a Yid studies Torah, and what gives you, and Asher Tasim also means Pnimius HaTorah is the key ingredient here. When a person studies Pnimius HaTorah, that allows them, that keeps them mindful of the fact that what he's engaged in, when he's engaged in studying Torah, he's studying Hashem's Torah, Torah's Havaya. So then when he goes about studying it, he does it with the proper humility. He accepts upon himself the yoke of Torah. Right, meaning that he studies Torah because that's what Hashem wants. And when he understands it, it's not that he endeavors to understand Torah, he tries to understand because he's trying to prove to himself that he's smart or to become a scholar, but because Hashem tells him he has to understand it. That's why he's doing it. So the whole thing is done with that proper humility and submission to the Eibusher's will. So when a person does that, and he understands it thoroughly, meaning he finds that pleasure in it, so then ve'ele, he reveals the Oren Sef HaBligvul in Torah itself, where he himself accesses that level that enhances the Torah. So where you have the level of Torah as its Chachmas of the Eibusher, as it's higher than coming to this world. Then you have Torah as it's been confined and compacted and limited and concealed and developed so that it could be understood. It could be understood in this world. But what you might be missing is the fact that comes from higher. In that lower level of Torah, as Torah is understandable in human intellect, you have the Oren Sef HaBligvul that comes from Pnimi Saratzin, that Geshmak of the Eibusher that's higher than all of these things.